Afghanistan has always been difficult for policy hawks, right? From 19th century Britain to the folks in Joe Biden's White House, it's a complicated land where an even more complicated people live. Afghanistan is often called the graveyard of empires. Each of these empires made a grave mistake. They were rigid in their policies, in their objectives, and in their strategies. It's a mistake that India is keen to avoid. New Delhi does not have imperial ambitions in Afghanistan, but it does want peace in the neighborhood. Until now, this meant actively supporting the Afghan government. The Taliban was nowhere in the picture. The American pullout changes this dynamic. India now has to deal with an emboldened Taliban. Ignoring them is not an option. So what does New Delhi do? Perhaps talk to them. There are reports that India has opened communication channels with the Taliban. The External Affairs Ministry has not confirmed this. So what we have are limited details and reports. Number one, the communication is being handled by Indian security officials and not diplomats. Number two, India is only engaging with certain factions of the Taliban. This is what reports say, the ones that are not on Pakistan's payroll. And number three, these channels are exploratory, which means both sides are sending out feelers, trying to get a measure of each other. Among the leaders India reportedly reached out to is this man, Mullah Baradar. This is significant because Baradar is a key player in the Afghan Taliban. He signed the deal with Washington on troop withdrawal, and he has held top positions in the Taliban regime. There are also reports that India opened channels with another Taliban leader, Abbas Stanigzai. He heads the Taliban's political office in Doha. Both these men are heavyweights in the Taliban, and India may be talking to both or either of them. If these reports are true, it would signal a massive policy shift by India. For years, the Taliban was India's mortal enemy, and rightly so. They were funded by the Pakistani deep state, they facilitated the hijacking of Indian Airlines Flight 814, and they repeatedly stirred trouble in Kashmir. So why is New Delhi changing track now? We can think of four main reasons. Number one, the Taliban is not an international pariah anymore. The Americans have signed a deal with them. The Afghan government is negotiating their return to the mainstream. Even former enemies like Russia and Iran are embracing them. So like it or not, the Taliban will soon dominate Afghan politics. And India has only two options here: ignore the Taliban and embrace irrelevance in Afghanistan, or deal with the Taliban on their own terms. Which brings us to reason number two on why India is doing what it is. The Taliban has promised to change, well, at least on paper. In May last year, they admitted that Kashmir was India's domestic matter. Now, this shift is very important. It signals a break between the Taliban and their overlords in Rawalpindi. Reason number three for India's shifting strategy. These talks are limited in nature. It is not a full-fledged embrace. We often mistake the Taliban for a singular organization with one leadership, but that's not the case. After 2 decades of war, the Taliban is a splintered group. There are dozens of factions, each with their own ideological differences. Some of them are Afghan nationalists. They do not have links with the Pakistani deep state. And India is reaching out, reportedly, only to these factions. Reason number four. India has made a huge bet on Afghanistan, a $3 billion bet to be precise. There are dozens of schools, hospitals and dams being built with Indian money. How can India protect these assets? The Taliban is a bigger fighting force than the Afghan army. Without Western troops, they could be overrun. And to avoid this, India needs a rational, tacit understanding with the Taliban. How will such an understanding play out? How can India balance its principles and its strategies? One thing New Delhi keeps talking about is protecting the gains that have been made on women's rights, religious rights, and education. And on this, India has refused to stand down. But will the Taliban agree? Actually, they may not have an option. If India needs the Taliban, it is also true that the Taliban needs India. Let me explain this. India is one of the most popular countries in Afghanistan. The public works have earned a lot of goodwill. In contrast, the Afghans view Pakistan and America with suspicion. And the Taliban knows this. They need India's funds and India's support to revive the country. It also makes for excellent optics. A friendship with the world's largest democracy. What better way to redeem yourself? But will this relationship blossom into something bigger? At this point, it looks unlikely. The Afghan government remains New Delhi's trusted partner, so while the Taliban outreach is a matter of strategy, the Kabul relationship is based on principles. Nonetheless, talking to the Taliban is a big shift for India, unimaginable for many. But it reflects the new Afghan reality. Countries that pursued rigid strategies have perished in Afghanistan. They have become enemies and worse. India is trying to avoid a repeat. But in the process, New Delhi must remember one thing: principles always trump strategy. Maybe not today, but in the long run. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.